In this program, I'm going to look at an R program. It's going to read a CSV file with some employee information, the number of hours they worked each day and their wage, and calculate a weekly salary for my employees. And I'm really just sort of playing around, doing some trial and error with when I read the data in. It's going to be in a data frame and sort of accessing different parts of the data frame in different ways, and those different ways of access have different types, and just sort of doing trial and error, seeing what does and doesn't work with these different ways of accessing the data. So let's look at the data first. So I had some Excel spreadsheet originally with this information, and then I saved it as a CSV. So there's the name, the wage, different days, and that's what I have. And then we're going to introduce total hours and salary components to the data frame that comes in from this. But what I had in Excel, the names are in there with a comma, and I was making a comma separated variables file, so that's why I ended up with these quotes. And the read CSV sort of understands that and will bring it in, not misunderstand the comma that's within the quotes, but sort of get rid of the quotes. So that's not going to be a problem. But the other problem that sort of came about was in Excel, I could calculate in Excel with those wages, but the wages were formatted as currency. And somehow when I saved as the CSV, that picked up a dollar sign. So it's not a pure number because of the dollar sign, and there's also a sort of a space hanging on the end. So I wanted to do some cleaning up of that and then make sure it's a number before I try to do anything calculated with it. Okay, so that's what I'm going to read in. So let's do that first. With R, I can just run little bits of the program. So I'm going to, in lines 2 and 3 here, read in the data and then use head to sort of spit some of it out and see what it looks like. Okay, so I see down here in the console, the first 6 of my rows, the name, the wage. And we see here, there are no quotes in the names. I can also over here in my environment sort of spread out these things. Okay, and we see here when I expand it out over here, it's telling me the type, and the name and the wage are CHR, are sort of strings. Okay, so there. Whereas the rest came in as integer. All right, so I just want to look at when you read something in, it is overall a data frame. So this thing I called emp data, employee data, is a data frame. And so I want to look at one way of accessing some component, some part of that, is to use sort of a square bracket quote to sort of, I'll call it an associative, an array type of approach. So I can run that, and I can sort of just pull out the names from this larger complicated thing. And if I want to pull out a particular name, then I do this weird sort of mixing my notations of $, square bracket, $name, $name, and then a number in square brackets to get the 2. So if I am printing out that was Priscilla Presley. So. And it started at 1. It was these are sort of 1 based. So, okay. But another way of accessing the data is with the $. And to me, it feels a little bit more like an object notation, but it's $sign instead of a dot. but okay. So, and we can see also in just the way it prints it, printed differently. So it does, although you can get the access the information, it is somehow different. And if I want to access a particular one, in this case, John Wilkes Booth, there we go. So that's the way. So I have these two ways of getting at this data. I'm going to sort of play back and forth and see what does and doesn't work with them, and as well as, you know, move on through this program so that I can do the calculation I want to do. Okay, so one thing is that there is this class method, and so I just want to see what these two things are. What is when I use square bracket quote. Now emp data, emp underscore data is itself a data frame, but if I run this and ask what the part of, that part of it using this notation, square bracket and quotes, is still a data frame. But down here, it's saying, and I picked out the Monday one, and so it knows that Monday is integers, whereas here it's a more complicated thing, the data frame. Okay. Now here I'm going to decide to sort of bring in a new field. So we see over here in the environment, I have the name, wage, and all the days. And what I'm going to do is introduce a new, I'm going to just call it a field, a new field for the sum. And I'm going to, in my calculation here, I'm mixing the two approaches, $Monday, $Tuesday, but square bracket quote Wednesday. And this is going to work. So in terms of doing this calculation, those were both sort of acceptable, and even mixing them was acceptable. And so now I see I've introduced a new field, sum, which is an integer, and it summed all the hours for the days for all of my employees. And I'm going to do the same mixing over here on my right-hand side, but on my left-hand side, I'm going to use a $sum2 notation. Okay. So I'm going to run that. And now I have sum2 is this more complicated data frame thing, and it's altogether sort of a little bit weird. It's got this little weird Wednesday thing in there, maybe because that Wednesday is where I started using the quote notation rather than the $sign notation. All right, but so I would say here that on the on the left-hand side, I'm having more luck with the square bracket quote approach, whereas I think I tend to have this when I'm on the right-hand side, when I'm trying to use it, the $sign notation seems to be more convenient and easier. But down here, when I'm on the left-hand side, this other approach seems to be better. I don't have a good explanation for that. I'm just experimenting, seeing what does and doesn't work. Okay. Now I'd actually like to go and sort of do the calculation, find the weekly salaries for these guys. And I had this issue with the wage, in that it is a string and not a number, so not really a setup for calculating at this stage. So I'd like to get rid of that $sign and get rid of that space, anything that might be getting in my way of converting it to a number. And so I'm using this gsub. So I'm going to find a regular expression. I'm going to look for some regular expression in the terms and the elements and of this wage, and in this case replace them with nothing, get rid of them. And the gsub notation is the pattern I'm looking for, what I want to replace it with, and then the thing that I'm going to be looking for it in and replacing it in. Well, actually, I think the replacing it in will be over here on this left-hand side. Okay, so I am, so I'm, again, and I'm using a regular expression and as my substitution, and a $sign has a meaning in regular expressions. So that could wreak a little havoc, and a $sign means in regular expressions, like the sort of find the pattern in the beginning. So I used a square bracket, and that allowed me to look for a set of things. And so then $sign only has a meaning in regular expressions if it's at the beginning, to say the pattern should be at the beginning. So once I put it in the square brackets, then it understood it as a regular old $sign. And there was also, so I want to get rid of the $sign and the space, find either of those things, and replace them with nothing. And I'm looking in the wage, and then that will become the new wage. And so let me run that, and we'll see this wage line here is going to get rid of the $sign, get rid of the space. So that's where we are. At this stage, we got rid of the $sign, we got rid of the space. And here I just have in 25, commented out. I tried this other approach and it didn't work. Okay, so again, these differences between these two ways of accessing parts of the data frame. Sometimes you can use one, sometimes you can use the other, but they're not interchangeable. They don't always work. Now I want to do, now that I've got rid of the $sign in the space, anything that might get in my way of converting this to a number, I want to convert it to a number. So I'm using this as.numeric method. And now we understand that these are numbers. Okay. So head just spits some stuff out. So let me spit some stuff out down here. Okay. So now I have clean wages, and I've summed the data, and then I have this weird little Wednesday thing. So I want to, I don't like that. I'm going to, that was caused by this weirdness here. So let me comment this one out. I'm just going to rerun it, clean it up, Control L, rerun it up to this stage. Okay, so now I have fairly clean names, wages, different days, and the sum of the hours of the different days. Okay, now I'd like to just do the calculation finally. This is, so I have, again, I'm going to calculate a salary. I've had more luck on the left-hand side using this square bracket quote notation. On the right-hand side, I'm having better luck using the $sign notation. And I'm going to use this else if method. So just a very, convenient, very R vector sort of related, convenient way to do this calculation. So I don't need to like write a loop or anything like that. And I'm going to say if the employee data, the sum component of the employee data is less than 40, using 40 as my borderline between overtime and not overtime. So if the hours, the sum of the hours is less than 40, Then I'm calculating the wage just by the sum times the wage. Else is the sort of third argument. So there's the test, what to do if it's true, what to do if it's false. And if they work more, if it's false, they work less than 40 hours. If they work more than 40 hours, then I'm going to pay them for their first 40 hours, their regular wage, 40 times their wage. And then for the hours that exceed 40, the overtime hours, so I'm taking the sum and subtracting 40, and I'm multiplying it by the wage times 1.5. I'm giving them time and a half. And so I'm going to add another field here. And so I printed out the first few rows with this head, and I've also done the calculation over here. So you see the weekly salaries for my various employees here. And then just one last thing, I did a very fast bar plot just to see the different salaries, and I can get them labeled and so on. I'm not interested in that here. I'm more interested in that here. Again, if I did this this other approach, it doesn't work. So again, this $ approach worked here. It didn't work here. So overall, what did I do? I read in some CSV files. I just showed different ways of accessing the information. Then those things have different data types. Then I can use sort of either notation or a mixed notation to do the calculating. I did a little cleaning up with a substitution and as.numeric to convert the type, to cast it as, and they're calling it number, I'll call it float, and doing a calculation, and just, again, some differences between this square bracket and $ approach to accessing the information. And sometimes you can use one, sometimes you can use the other, sometimes you can use both, but they're not interchangeable. Okay, that's what I wanted to show you. Thanks very much for your attention.